What we want to do now is we're going to look in quite a lot of detail at the life of Joseph. Joseph, for me, really represents one of the kind of core characters in the Bible who demonstrates and illustrates for us what kingdom business is all about, and how our business giftings can become part of God's purposes and become a ministry. And the first question I ask in this is for us to think about what are Joseph's spiritual gifts. Okay, so two groups yesterday looked at these passages in 1 Corinthians 12. And there's another section in 1 Corinthians 28. So 1 Corinthians 12, 4 to 11, and 28 to 31. And if we just turn to those passages, and you have a look through those spiritual gifts, if we can just establish what we believe Joseph's spiritual gifts to be. Now, I'm assuming that you kind of know the story of Joseph reasonably well. We're going to look at it in quite a lot of detail, if you don't. But for those of you who do know the story, what would you say from that list of spiritual gifts in 1 Corinthians were Joseph's spiritual gifts? So one is given the message of wisdom, to another the message of knowledge by means of the same Spirit, to another faith, to another gifts of healing, to another miraculous powers, to another prophecy, to another distinguishing between spirits, to another speaking in different kinds of tongues, and to still another the interpretation of tongues, or one might think of as interpretation of dreams possibly. All these are the work of one and the same Spirit, and he gives them to each one just as he determines. And then in 28 to 31, and in the church, God has appointed first of all apostles, second prophets, teachers, workers of miracles, those having gifts of healing, those able to help others, those with the gifts of administration, those speaking different kinds of tongues, or are all apostles, all prophets, etc., etc. So out of that list, what would we say Joseph's spiritual gifts were? Word of knowledge. So he was someone who had, in a sense, words of knowledge, words of wisdom. Okay, that's a good one. So let's put that up here. Okay, anything else? If we think of Joseph's story.
It started with prophecy.
Prophecy, yep. And that sort of tension between dreams and the role of his own dreams and those prophetic dreams he had at the very beginning of his life, where he dreamed of the sheet weaves bowing down to him or bowing down to his, and then the moon and the stars also bowing down, and the moon and the sun, but bowing down to him, so his mother and father. So he had that sort of prophetic dreams very early on in his own life. Interestingly, I don't think he was able to really interpret that dream in his own life until much later on in his life. He may have had the dream, but he didn't have the interpretation. He was good at interpreting other people's dreams, but he didn't necessarily fully interpret his own until quite a lot later, as we'll see. So another one there, I mean, I've just said it really. What's the other one I've just said? Interpreting dreams. Okay. Okay, there's one more, and it's in the second part, in 28 to 31. Administration. Okay. Now, most often over the years when I've been going around doing this, and I sort of say to people, well, which are his greatest gifts? Now, what's Joseph's most famous gift? And out of those two, which one do you think most people say? Interpreting dreams. The thing people remember about Joseph is he interpreted dreams. Now, he did interpret dreams. He interpreted some very powerful and very important dreams, and he interpreted them accurately, and he was definitely gifted in that. But he did it twice. That doesn't constitute a particularly regular gift that is used throughout one's life. This is two moments in a man's entire life where he interprets some dreams. They were very, very important moments. They were gateway moments. If he didn't interpret those two sets of dreams, he would never have got into the position he got into. But the point is, he only interpreted two dreams. So interpreting dreams happened twice. How often did he use the gift of administration? A lot. So what I want to look at is that, if you like, is in the realm of years, a lifetime. So I personally feel it's not unreasonable to argue that Joseph's primary spiritual gift is the gift of administration. That's not to underplay the interpretation of dreams and how significant it was, but the issue here is that because we see interpreting dreams as maybe a very spiritual thing, somehow supernatural. So because we think of it as supernatural, we give it status. Yeah. And we think, this must be a really significant gift, because it's not something I can do in the natural. Can I suggest, therefore, you're doing your administration wrong? There's no difference. It's not that we're not all apostles. There's no difference between these gifts. There's not a hierarchy here. So if you're thinking that interpreting dreams is somehow more special, more clever, more spiritual, more unique, something that you think of as somehow more powerful, it's not that your view of interpreting dreams is wrong, it's that your view of administration is wrong. And so we need to kind of grasp, how is that a spiritual gift? How is that as powerful as interpreting dreams? And you think, wow, this is a whole different concept here to get what that means. So I want to look at Joseph's life. I want to kind of unpack this issue of our giftings and just how powerful godly gifting is in the hands of believers. So actually, he interpreted 3 dreams, because in the end, he actually interpreted his own dreams. By the end of his life, we see that he says to his brothers, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, for the saving of many lives. And he finally kind of begins to understand the purpose of his life. We'll come to that in a moment. But he did 34 years of consistent blessing and the saving of a nation that came through the administration gift. So that had profound effects. So I want to look at the story in a bit more detail. And we could spend all day just on Joseph. There's a huge amount in this, but I just want to kind of draw out some particular issues. And one of the first things to say is, when we have a spiritual gift, it just wants to bear fruit. It's a bit like weeds just want to grow. You can't kind of hold them down. They just want to grow. And there is something about a gift that just wants to burst forth from your life. And we see this in Joseph. So when Joseph, at the beginning of his story, we know that he had this dream. He's then taken, his brothers are then jealous of him. His brothers sell him into captivity. He's taken as a slave to Egypt, and he's sold into the household of Potiphar. And Potiphar is an influential, powerful man. He clearly has significant, of his time, if you like, business interests, in that he has a household that needs to be managed. And it sounds like quite a complex task. And very early on, in the context of slavery, in the context of being repressed, in the context of being where he didn't want to be, we see his gift just can't be held down. It just bursts forth and bears fruit. But what's really interesting is we also see in this passage we're going to look at that it is others around him, in this case Potiphar, who unlocks the potential in Joseph. He recognises the hand of God in Joseph, and then he gives him opportunity. So Joseph's gift does not bear fruit outside of the context of working in the world with others. And sometimes actually you'll find it can be non-Christians around you who actually unlock your gift. It's amazing how often that can be the case. And so if we look at Genesis chapter 39, and we're now in the story where Joseph is in the house of Potiphar. And if we look at verse 2, so Genesis 39, verse 2. And let's go through to verse 5. In fact, sorry, let's go all the way through to verse 6. So the key thing here is that Joseph he's a slave, He's in the household of someone, so when he first arrived in that household, he would have been invisible. No one would have cared about him at all. He would have been a nobody. He would have been worse than an Egyptian slave. He was a Canaanite slave. This guy was just worthless. And yet, somehow, in a period of time, we don't know how long, the Egyptian master notices him. So, what does the New Testament say from the verses we looked at yesterday about how servants and slaves should behave with their masters? Can you remember what the kind of key finding from, I think it was the book of Ephesians, no, it wasn't Ephesians, it was, which passage did we look at? Yeah, it was Ephesians chapter 5 and 6. It was the bit about slaves and masters, where in Ephesians, Paul says to them, slaves, basically work for your master as if working for the Lord. Yeah? Basically, just work, to do your best. Don't whinge. Don't complain about the injustice of the fact that you're not having your gifts used best, that you're not a free man. That may come, but don't whinge about your circumstances. Just get on and do the best you can with what you've got. And it seems to me that Joseph must have been someone who understood that teaching that Paul brought several thousand years later. Because he's noticed. And the bottom line is, despite being a slave, this Egyptian recognises something in Joseph. But more importantly, what does he recognise in Joseph? Two things, really, he recognises in Joseph. So if we look at verse... where are we? Verse 3. Two things.
The Lord gave him success in everything he did.
Yep. So this man sees that...
The Lord was with him.
So he sees that the Lord was with him.
Yeah.
Now this is a heathen man, and he's able to see the presence of God with this man. Mm. Now one of the things we're going to see throughout Joseph's life is people recognising the presence of God in him. Mm. Godless men recognising the presence of God. Now that is in itself profound. So if that alone doesn't make it a ministry, I don't know what it is. I mean, at its most basic, it's a ministry. The Lord has been recognised. We don't really need to go any further. I can stop now. That's the end of the session. You know, that's kind of it. If the Lord is recognised in you and in what you do, you are in ministry. You are bringing glory to God. You are bringing God into the world, and you're making him manifest. But interestingly, this man is attracted to Joseph, not just because he sees a godly man, but because he sees a godly man who succeeds in everything he touches.
Yeah.
You can't get away from the fact that the world is attracted to that kind of thing. The world is going to look at success and go, that's my language. I get that. Where do you get that from? Mm-hmm. So it's not that we can only witness to the gospel through success, but let's not be naive. Success attracts attention. So don't be surprised if God makes you successful in things. But it's not that it's all about success, okay? So, because we'll see, his story has some downsides in it as well, and some moments when things are going badly.